everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan, and today we are going to try to learn the difference between sex and gender, because that difference allegedly holds the key to unlocking one of the great imponderable mysteries of our time, which is how someone born male can be a woman and vice versa. I'm putting this one in my Awful Arguments by Transactivist series because although it doesn't sound as much like an argument as a command, it is generally presented as some kind of gotcha, as in, trans women are women, I don't need to say how, I don't need to say why, you just need to learn the difference between sex and gender. Haha, gotcha. They say it as if they assume we don't know that the words sex and gender are used with different meanings a lot of the time, and B, once you understand the difference, it will be patently obvious why men can be women, and vice versa, which is, of course, arrant nonsense. In fact, it's worse than that. Some of them are so delusional that they think the world will be a better place if everyone is forced to learn the difference, because forcing people to learn prescribed ideologies has a long history of making the world a better place, doesn't it? Why, it will even bring world peace. Okay, let's deal briefly with what sex is. Sorry to patronize the vast majority of viewers of my channel, whom I believe to be intelligent and knowledgeable. This won't take long. Sex refers to two things. One is sexual relations. The other meaning refers to the categories of male and female. As I pointed out in a previous video, there are people on the other side of this debate who insist that sex is a social construct.
Like Nicholas Matt, lecturer in gender studies at Toronto University.
It's not correct that there is such a thing as biological sex.
ActionAid UK. You might want to pause the video to read their incredible statement. Chase Strangio, who is transgender and a staff attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union, and who seems keen to be remembered as a bit of a plonker. George Takei, Star Trek actor with over 3 million followers on Twitter. George thinks you sound scientifically ignorant and elevate transphobia. Trans influencer and YouTuber Riley Dennis, etc., etc., etc.
That was from the first video I did responding to Jamie Dodger. I kind of doubt any of them would seriously dispute biological sexual dimorphism, but they've evidently latched on to some painfully silly ideas from Judith Butler or somebody else. It gets worse. Male and female are sexes. There are only two of them. Biologists who haven't been ideologically captured define them by gamete, and we all follow one or other developmental pathway towards the production of either large or small gametes. Sometimes things don't work out. People are born with disorders of the reproductive tract. Not being able to produce motile sperm or ova doesn't mean you're not male or female, respectively. Underneath my last video, which was also a response to Jamie Dodger, was this comment. Where the hell is Jamie a woman? He identifies as male, looks like a man, and even has male genitals. Where is he female? Note that he uses the terms woman and female and man and male interchangeably, and that's fine, because although he is wrong about Jamie's sex, which even Jamie herself is truthful about, women are female and men are male. I'm also intrigued by the where is she female, not why, not how, but where as in location, and that made it very easy to answer concisely that Jamie is female in every cell. Every one of the trillions of cells in our bodies contain our sex chromosomes. Now, I am not one of those who would normally make the chromosome argument, X and Y. Chromosomes determine our sex rather than define it. But if you seriously think that sex is about location on our bodies, that amputating your breasts and fashioning a phallus out of a chunk of your arm flesh changes your sex, it's a very easy point to make. I did mention that Jamie doesn't have male genitals. So far as I know, she has had cosmetic surgery to create something that resembles a penis. But sex is not about looks. What our bodies look like naturally is a result of our evolved function, our potential role in reproduction. This is how our sex is defined, and it doesn't change regardless of what we do to our bodies. Jamie will never produce small gametes because the developmental pathway she followed was towards the production of large ones. So they responded with, I'd love to know how much about trans surgeries you know that you can make such a statement. I am a bit squeamish. I don't need to know all the gruesome details about surgeries undertaken to know what their purpose is and which ones are for cosmetic purposes. Besides, sex can be changed by a surgery. It's very concerning that anybody seriously believes this, and this person is not the only one. Here is a bit of a conversation I had on someone else's channel. I asked someone if they seriously believed that a man who's had what they call bottom surgery, meaning genital surgery, can have a baby. And as you can see, they seriously do believe that a man can literally get ovaries and a uterus via surgery. Where the hell are they getting this from? Uterine transplants are still at an experimental stage in women. The only attempt that I know of to transplant a womb into a man was the autogynephile Lily Elber's case back in 1931, and he died. It actually beggars belief that this was attempted 90 years ago and on a 48-year-old man. Right, to go back to that first guy, gender, however, cannot. Your gender has always been the same since you were born, and Jamie has always been male. If we talk about his gender, not his sex, that one was changed. Interesting. This is, of course, the total opposite of what many genderists say. Some accept that sex is immutable, but claim that gender can be fluid, even changing day to day, as with Philip Bunce, aka Pippa Bunce. Others, and this was one of my peak transing moments, will claim that neither sex nor gender change, but gender is so much more important than sex that the convicted double rapist who now calls himself Jessica Winfield has always been a woman, but he just committed the rapes while in a male body. This was tweeted by Josh Jackman, who at the time was writing for Pink News, and it is probably one of the sickest comments I've ever seen made by a gender loon. So let's talk about gender and what it means, or is supposed to mean. Many genderists argue that male and female are sexes, while woman and man are genders, which in turn are social identities. I'm an old school second wave feminist. In my youth, I acquired an understanding of gender as a system that keeps society male dominated. We did not eschew the word woman. It was understood to mean both female as in sex and gender as in feminine, as in what behaviours and roles and appearances are considered to be appropriate for female people. As Simone de Beauvoir wrote in The Second Sex, one is not born but rather becomes a woman, meaning that we learnt how we were supposed to think and behave as women were required to do in order to fulfill our prescribed roles, our gender roles under patriarchy. Our aim as feminists was to challenge and rebel against gendered notions in order to liberate women. Of course, that quote by Simone de Beauvoir has been taken out of context by modern-day genderists who say, oh, look what a 20th century feminist icon said. I don't have to be born a woman in order to become one. In fact, in the very next sentence, de Beauvoir makes it clear she is talking about females. No biological, psychological, or economic destiny defines the figure that the human female acquires in society. It is civilization as a whole that develops the product intermediate between female and eunuch, which one calls feminine. Having said that, there are some genderists who insist that men who call themselves trans women, or just women increasingly, are female. Maybe someone should tell them to research the difference between sex and gender. Here's a comment on one of my videos. This one commented under my response to Samantha Lux on We Spa. Of course, I consider transgender women as women. I'm not going to go into why transgender women are women, because there are plenty of studies and research out there supporting that. Does she actually believe this, or is she silly enough to think she can bluff me? I'm not sure. If you're interested in why I believe trans women are women, I suggest starting with researching the difference between sex and gender. The World Health Organization is a good place to start. It so happens that I have on my website pages on the very topic of sex and gender and the difference between them in the context of this debate about transgenderism, and I give the WHO's, the World Health Organization's definition of gender, and state quite clearly that that is the definition I am using on that particular page. I did link her to it, but she just dismissed it out of hand because it's my website, therefore it's biased, it's of no value. That is something I encounter quite frequently from imbeciles. My website is, above all else, a resource with links to thousands of articles written by a range of people, but the cultists are too close-minded to do the research that might contradict what they want to believe, so they use the excuse that they won't look at that website because it's mine or because it's peak trans, so it's obviously biased. Show me a website on this topic that isn't biased one way or the other. This is what I said in the first video I made in this series of bad arguments by trans activists, the one called A Woman Is. That's what gender is. It's masculine and feminine, not man and woman. These are not genders. They are the words we use for adults of the two sexes in humans, male and female. Masculine and feminine are social constructs. They refer to societal expectations of how people are supposed to look and think and behave based on what sex they are. That is what I mean when I use the word gender, even though I hardly ever do. I might use it in certain expressions like gender non-conforming, because I think that is widely understood, and it does accord with the World Health Organization definition that gender refers to the socially constructed characteristics of women and men, such as norms, roles, and relationships of and between groups of women and men. Perhaps at this point I should briefly try to address the question of whether gender is innate. The short answer is that it depends what you mean by gender. That is why I always press people who promote it to be precise in what they mean by it. If you go with the WHO definition, then gender isn't innate. Professionals working in fields like neuroscience and psychology all seem to be at loggerheads over the issue, and I'm not going to pretend to be anywhere near as well informed on the subject as any of them are. Deborah So, who is a neuroscientist and sexologist, has written this very interesting book entitled The End of Gender, and the second chapter is devoted to what she calls the myth that gender is a social construct. On page 42 to 43, she writes, to claim that there are no differences between the sexes when looking at group averages, or that culture has greater influence than biology, simply isn't true. Socialization shapes the extent to which our gender is expressed or suppressed, but it doesn't dictate whether someone will be masculine or feminine, or whether she or he will be gender conforming or gender atypical. So she goes on to explain that studies reveal differences between male and female brains. Now, the notion of male and female brains is hotly disputed by many, including neuroscientist Gina Rippon, who in her also very interesting book, The Gendered Brain, mentions Deborah So just once and in rather disdainful terms. Simon Baron-Cohen's theory about males being innately better on average at systemizing and females at empathizing, and that this difference is demonstrated from early infancy, sounds perfectly plausible to me. I certainly don't believe that the reason the vast majority of violent and sexual crimes are committed by men is all down to how we raise and socialize our male children. And given how masculine and male typical in their behaviors are so many trans-identifying men, I am unpersuaded by this argument that while their sex is male, their gender is feminine. It makes no sense. For a perfect illustration of the aggression and misogyny of many trans-identifying men, I recommend a video that Clive Simpson has just posted called The Case of Dana Rivers, in which he talks not just about Rivers himself, but also how trans activists forced the closure of the Michigan Women's Festival, which I had already read something about in this book by the disgusting Julia Serrano, who was part of the campaign against the festival. What I don't get is why Deborah So and others use the word gender. If typical or general differences between men and women are biologically dictated, why not stick to calling them typical sex differences instead of confusing them with things that are obviously socially constructed, like how we're supposed to dress? I do realise there is a danger of capitulating to biological essentialist ideas, but there are nowadays systems in place to prevent discrimination on grounds of sex. My commenter, Josie, by the way, eventually came back with a dictionary definition telling me I could have found it myself on Google, and that was the point at which I lost patience with her. I've had the same problem with other cultists who can't seem to grasp that if you are saying male people can be women and vice versa because of this thing you call gender, then you need to be able to explain exactly what you mean by that. So often they will say things like, look it up, Google it. No, I know about the different ways in which the word gender is used, and so far none of you have said anything that explains or justifies your assertion that men can be women and women men. Again, in that first video of Jamie Dodger that I responded to, we had this.
For most people in the world, like me, you know you're a woman, like I do up here.
That was it. In a video in which they repeatedly used the term gender identity, not once did they explain what they mean by gender. They reduced it to some mysterious, untestable knowledge in the brain. Now, the definition Josie posted was from lexico.com. Noun, either of the two sexes, male and female. Yes, indeed, it is used as a polite alternative word for the two sexes. Some suggest that this is because of Anglo-Saxon prudishness, and wouldn't surprise me, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. Okay, that accords with the World Health Organization's definition. The term is also used more broadly to denote a range of identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. Yes, this is when the word is used to refer to the label one chooses to apply to oneself regardless of whether it is reasonable to do so. A man might declare his label is woman, and he may demand that we start lying to ourselves in order to humour him. These labels, or so-called identities, also include various made-up nonsense like neutroir, demi-boy, epicene, I'll get out of here. What this definition from Lexico does not do is explain how men can actually be women and vice versa. We know that the gender cultists refer to woman and man as things you can identify as, but they're not. That is why people keep making these tiresome responses about identifying as an attack helicopter or as a cat or whatever. But there is a serious point there. You can identify as whatever you like, but it isn't reasonable to expect other people to take that identity seriously and to readjust their recognition of reality. I was assigned a Londoner, but I identify as, let's say, a native New Yorker. I also identify as 30 years younger than I am. It's your choice whether you're going to humour me or not, but if you don't humour me, I will absolutely call you a bigot. I will harass and abuse you. I will try to get you cancelled and fired because obviously there's no other way you are likely to submit to my will and go along with my fantasy. You get my point? Saying research the difference between sex and gender isn't an argument. It won't work on us and it just makes you look stupid. Do better. Thanks for watching. Bye.
You're a native New Yorker.